Thank you for joining me for this week's version of the Shore Report. My name is Robbie Interchak from the Shoreview Real Estate Team, powered by New Street. And this week, we're going to be going into the main numbers, taking a look at all the stats. We're recording a little bit late on a Friday because we wanted to make sure we get all our stats and all our information put together, get our reports done for May so we can look at all the numbers from last month for this week's Shore Report. So let's get into the numbers. We're going to go over the regions, some of the cities that we operate in Southwestern Ontario, and we're going to look at the stats. This is the most thorough, most relevant, and most timely real estate market report you're going to find out there for Southwestern Ontario and for the Greater Toronto, Hamilton, Durham, and Niagara region. So let's go. Take a look. So average price for all of GTA, we're at 1.2 million approximately. That's the average price of home, whether you're looking at condos, towns, single family homes. That's the average price, and that price is 3.7% higher than it was last month. So overall, GTA, things are kind of looking pretty positive, going in a positive direction from last month. We compare that to last year. That's 1.2% lower than it was last year. So that's an interesting thing to look at, because in the last few months, prices have actually been down quite a bit more than that, in around the 5, 7, 10, 15, or even more percent range. So it's interesting to see those markets stabilize. We're just 1.2% down than we were from May 2022. Something interesting to look at is the 2020 numbers. So 3 years ago, prices have come up about 30%, 27.8% from May 2020. So it's always interesting to look back a couple of years versus just last year, and you know, kind of looking at it from that perspective. Activity in and around the 9,000 mark, so 9,000 sales. That means sales were up 20% from last month. So we're seeing more activity, higher prices overall in the GTA. So overall, things are kind of moving in a positive direction as of now. When we look at May, average days on market 20. So that's a little bit down from last month, up from last year though. So the activity is a little bit quicker. Average sales to listing price in the GTA is 105%. So more houses are selling for over asking than for under or for list price. So that's a common theme right now we're seeing in the market. Let's move over to Hamilton. So in May, prices in Hamilton were 750,000, stable from last month. Not much change from there. If you look at last year, prices were down 8% from last year. So if you compare that to the GTA, where prices were down just 1.2 from last year, prices are down 8% in Hamilton. Really interesting stat to look at, and we'll go over some insight on that as we go through this, and look at some other regions. 750 sales activity, 11% up from last month. So we're seeing good activity in Hamilton. Average days on market really low in Hamilton, only 10 days on market in comparison to the GTA, so quite a bit less. So things are moving a little bit quicker, price points a little bit lower, but it's interesting to see those prices a little bit more stable. In Niagara, prices are actually down from last month by about 1%, so still very stable, not much movement, down 11%, 11.9%, almost 12% from last year. So 8% down in Hamilton, 11%, 12% down in Niagara from last year. If you go into Northumberland, same thing, 10% down from last year. Prices down 10% from last year, 635,000. And this is the kind of insight I'm kind of correlating here when I look at this is, and we're seeing it in the market, as you know, with our listings and with some of the transactions that we're doing throughout the Greater Toronto area and into Hamilton, Durham. So the closer you get to Toronto, cities like Mississauga and Pickering, Ajax, and the Durham region there, what we're seeing is that those markets are rebounding, especially Toronto as well. Those markets are rebounding quite quickly. So we're seeing the prices moving up quickly. We're seeing the prices stabilize much quicker and kind of holding values overall in comparison to previous year. And then when you go into the secondary markets like Hamilton and Niagara, we're still seeing those prices a little bit lower in comparison to last year. So what that does, and we have a lot of clients that are going through this right now, where they're thinking about selling properties in and around, say, you know, the Greater Toronto area, markets like Mississauga or Durham, and they're okay going to secondary markets like a Hamilton or a Niagara or into Northumberland out east. So, and that transition is making a lot of sense for them because Toronto and those areas are seeing prices increase, and those markets are doing really well in terms of pricing. And then those secondary markets aren't bouncing back as of yet. So, giving them an opportunity where they can sell for a really good price, but then they can still find a pretty good deal. As much as those markets are coming back and rebounding, and we're seeing more activity and prices going up, but it's still, you can still find a pretty good deal, and you can still make that transition, and it's fairly a smart transition to make because you're getting a good value for your home, and then you're buying a fairly good price, not as competitive market as you go out into these secondary markets, and that's different than some of the situations we've seen from, say, a year and a half or 2 years ago. During the pandemic, where we've seen those secondary markets booming because everybody was working remotely, so they were moving out into those areas. So even though you were making a transition maybe back then, it wasn't it didn't make as much sense because you were in a multiple bid situation when you went to buy, and you were paying over asking, and you were paying a significant amount of money in those secondary markets. Whereas now things have come down a little bit there, and we're seeing, things really pick up in the core closer to Toronto. People are going back to work, so we're seeing those markets pick up. So that's an interesting trend that you can kind of see as you look through these reports. When you look at the price point in the GTA, coming down just a little bit, but in the secondary markets, those prices are still quite a bit down from last year, and a little bit more stable. So lots of opportunity in that kind of situation. When we look at London, 630 median price, up from last month by about 1.6%, still down from last year 8%, 587 sales, up 20% from last month. So that market's picking up. 10 days on market, 100% sales to list price. So overall very stable. Now let's go into the West End. When we say West End, we're talking about Toronto West, and then further west into Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington. In Toronto West, we're going to take a look at some stats, and I'm just going to see if I see any interesting information here that might pop out at me. An average price of $1,084,000, and overall prices are down from last year, but they're varying in different product types are varying. So detached and condo towns are kind of seeing the highest price decrease, and then semis and towns in Toronto West are seeing very minimal movement from last year. In terms of last month, overall prices are up 5% from last month. So Toronto West is doing really well. From last month, you could see that market pick up, down 6% from last year. So obviously you're still seeing a little bit of a drop. Average sales price to list price, you can see everything's pretty much selling over asking there. 860 sales in Toronto West, up from last month, up from last year. And we're seeing the condos picking up in Toronto West. You can see those sales pick up a little bit. And also when you look at the condo prices, they're only down just under 5%, so lower than detached. So I feel like the condo market is slowly starting to pick up, which we haven't seen that market pick up as much as we might have on the single family side. Mississauga, 1.14 million average price right now, average sales price, up 6% from last month. So that's huge. And if you look at that in comparison to last year, we're pretty much stable with last year. So Mississauga seems to have pretty much recovered quite a bit from the downturn of the market that we've seen over the last year. Prices overall mostly selling over asking. We're seeing a lot of offer dates in Mississauga on all types of product types. But it's interesting that the condos are selling for about 100% of asking price. So you're not seeing those offer dates as much in Mississauga on the condos, but sales are picking up overall when you look at from last year. So prices are pretty similar to where they were last year, but sales are picking up. So that's an interesting trend that we're seeing. You can see sales are up 32% overall, and the detached market is picking up quite a bit in Mississauga there. Oakville, 1.5 million average price, median price, up 7.1% from last year. That's really interesting. So that's a really interesting statistic there. So we're up from last year quite a bit. We're not seeing a lot of cities up from last year, but Oakville seems to be one that's increased. Maybe there was some big sales in Oakville that skewed that number a little bit in the luxury market, but 7.1 only down 0.5% from last month. So stable from last month, but we're seeing a big increase from last year. That's interesting. Sales activity is 217, up from last year 2.8% in Oakville. Burlington, interestingly, is a little bit down on price from last month, down from last year about 4%, but sales here are picking up as well. Let's go into Durham quickly. Durham region, 988,000 sales price, up 3.4% overall. So this is the entire Durham region. So this is an interesting stat to look at because we have the product types here as well to compare. So Durham region is up 3.4% from last month, and prices are pretty stable. So that sounds pretty accurate. The Durham region has been one of the regions, I would say, if not the top region, to bounce back. And you can see it here because all the other regions, if you go back, you can see that they're still lacking a little bit from last year. 10% down in Northumberland, 12% down in Niagara, 8% down in Hamilton, and even the GTA still down 1.2% on average from last year. But if you look at the Durham region, only 0.7% down from last year, up 3.4% from last month. So the Durham market is definitely leading the way in terms of bouncing back from the market downturn. And we're seeing a lot of offer dates here, 108% average sales to list price. So pretty much the majority of sales in Durham are over asking. We're seeing that market really thrive. Detached homes just down 1% from last year. So not a lot of movement there. Sales activity up 18% from last month and up 4% from last year. So good increase of sales activity. Pickering, if we go down into the cities in Durham, you can see the individual stats, and we make these reports available so you can go through them individually and take a look at them. Pickering, prices up 2.1 from last month, very stable in comparison to last year, similar to the Durham region. Sales are up. Similar thing in Ajax, still decreased from last year, 3.3%, up 6.2% from last month. So Ajax, a little bit slow to recover, but a big jump this month. Sales activity is up from last month, but still down from last year. So Ajax is performing a little bit differently than some of the other cities, taking a little bit longer to bounce back and see those positive increases, but still very stable. Whitby, you can see 6% up from last year. So Whitby, I would say if there was one city in all the Southwestern Ontario, it'd be Whitby. Whitby's really done really well in terms of prices and just seeing that market. Not a lot of inventory though. You can see 187 sales, so not a lot of sales happening in that market. But the prices have held really well, and you can see up 6% from last year. Oshawa up 1.3% from last year. 855,000 average price. Sales activity 312 sales, up from last month about 25%. We go into Northumberland. These stats, they don't have much data because these markets are a little bit smaller. 622,000 average price. In Brighton, down from last month, down from last year about 11%. So those secondary markets you're seeing, they're still quite a bit lower prices than they were last year. Sales activity is starting to pick up a little bit. Belleville, similar activity picking up. Prices in and around 5% lower than last year. Quinte West, 567 average price, 40 sales. Not a whole lot of activity. So interesting to look at all the different regions, look at all the different products. These reports, we put a lot of effort into them to make sure that we try to pick out as much analysis and stay up to date on all the different markets. As much as we get insights from individual sales and buys and neighborhoods and things like that in all the different markets, it's really good to look at it from a high level and understand it and try to pull some insights from it. And I think the biggest insight that we can get is the one that I mentioned, where we're seeing the markets close to Toronto come back. We're seeing those prices really stabilize and come back to where they were last year, and then in some cases even above and beyond to where they were last year. maybe not into the all-time high peak markets of February of last year, but starting to kind of get there in some of the markets near Toronto. But the secondary markets, as you go out into Niagara and Hamilton and Northumberland, those markets are taking their time to recover. So a lot of people are transitioning into those markets. It's a smart time to transition into from the primary to the secondary markets right now, because a lot of good deals out there, and then you can still get really good money for your home in the primary market. So I hope this report was useful. I hope you got some good insights out of it. This one's a little bit comprehensive. If you watch the whole thing, good for you, and good to stay on top of all the stats. We'll cut this up and try to make it a little bit shorter and sweeter. But thank you for tuning in. Friday, June 2nd. We're here every week with these reports, trying to give you as much real estate information, real estate insights, keep you on top of the market. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Robert Yanachak, or the team at Shoreview. We'll be glad to give you more specific insights, maybe on a specific neighborhood or specific property that you're thinking about getting an evaluation on. These are just general high-level stats that give you some good understanding of the market, but every single, we go into the product types here, but every single market's different, and you got to really look at product type and the neighborhood and the demand and everything's fluctuation. But this report will give you some good insights and good general overview. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Have a great weekend.